Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am Ellen Lewis from Crazy for You Yarns, and I am so excited to have you here tonight because we have a very special guest, Rosann Fleischauer. Rosann is a knitwear designer, and her book, Cozy Coastal Knits, hits the newsstand tomorrow. Do they even have newsstands anymore? I guess they don't really, but it hits the bookshelf. So you can find it at your local bookstore or maybe even your local yarn store. And I am so excited to have her here. I've known Rosann for several years and she is just always such a pleasure. And I think you will really enjoy hearing about her book and also about her path from knitter to knitwear designer. So let me bring her on. Hi, Rosann. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you doing, Ellen?
Doing great. Doing great. Thanks so much for coming. It's nice to have you here again.
It's great to see you too. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I often do this little fun thing. So let's just do it real quick. Okay. You can't think about this. It's like quick, all right?
I've been thinking
All right.
all day, so good.
Beach. What's that?
I've been thinking all day, so not thinking is good.
Okay, good. All right. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
City life or country life?
City life.
Wine or cocktails?
Cocktails.
Garments or accessories?
Garments.
Cotton or wool?
Cotton.
Budget or splurge?
Splurge.
Knitting or crocheting?
Can it be both?
It can.
Okay, then both.
Ooh, we have a comment already from Amelia. Loves your top.
Oh,
We'll just take a break and you can tell them about the top.
Thank you, Amelia. It is a top that I had designed. It was one of the first things I ever designed, actually. I don't even know what the yarn is. I never wrote the pattern down, but I decided I wanted to learn how to make cables and that I wasn't very good at picking up stitches. So I figured out a way that you could do the trim on it live with live stitches.
I love it. It's beautiful. So your first book, how does it feel to be a published author?
It feels really neat. I'm really excited about it. I didn't think I would be so excited. I figured, all these years in business and having filings with federal agencies and just all these other things that, what was another 200 pages? But it's really cool.
I think it's so cool. There's something about being published. I mean, I think it's kind of a big deal, right?
I was really happy and I was honored to actually have been chosen by the publishing house when they were deciding what they were going to catalog for last year to release this year. And it's just kind of cool. It doesn't really feel real. I think tomorrow will probably feel more holistically real because it's actually the release date of the book.
Super cool. So let's talk about, I mean, I don't know when you started knitting. I started knitting before the days of Ravelry, right? So all knitting patterns were kind of in books or leaflets or whatever. And now it seems like there's so many patterns, if not all patterns are, on Ravelry. So why a book and not a collection of Ravelry patterns to download?
Well, for me, it was more about the idea that as individuals, we all have different tastes and we all have different things that are available to us. And somehow releasing these 21 designs as individual patterns or a pattern collection didn't feel like it presented a complete picture. I felt like I was doing a disservice because over the years, I've worked with a lot of different yarn companies and with different local yarn stores to learn about what are the things that customers need? What do customers ask about? So I wanted to make sure I incorporated into the book information about gauge, information about blocking. It didn't have to be elementary information, but it had to be information that would provide even a seasoned knitter with some level of engagement and a new thing to try, whether it was using a kaleidoscope when you go to pick out colors in the yarn store, or the idea that, you don't have to necessarily write down every row that you're on. You can get a really cool little tool that will just make people laugh when you take it out of your bag. And I think that by bringing more of a holistic view into knitting as something that we can enjoy and engage with over time, regardless of what yarn happens to be available to us, it was more of a story than it was 21 individual patterns.
That makes sense. So, for those of you who have not had the privilege of seeing the book, I have a pre-copy that Rosann sent me, nice and signed. So, I'm super excited about that. But there is a whole big section in the front, and lots and lots of good information in there. And I think it really is more than just a pattern collection. It's almost like a manual on how to improve your knitting, as you say, regardless of where you are in your knitting journey.
Right.
It's beautiful. It's the kind of stuff that we really want our knitters to know. And it's the kind of book you can say, here's a great book with a lot of really good resources in it.
Thank you. That was the idea. It was to try and bring people together, to have that environment where people could share and learn from each other. And my hope is that over time, I'll learn other things from other knitters, just like I do around the table at your store and at other stores whenever I get the chance to visit.
We love it when you come. So let me say real quick hi to everybody who's here. Hey, Barbara and Leslie and Susie and Terry and Amy and Amelia and Gwen and Donna. Hi, Colleen, Rita, Jana. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, Donna has already ordered the book. So
thank you, Donna.
I put a link in the, I can't remember if it was in the newsletter or in this or both, but I put a link to where they can order it. So yay.
Oh, thank you.
When I was learning to knit, as I said, a long time ago, I learned a lot from really good designers. I remember I had a lot of Debbie Bliss patterns that had all of this kind of information in the front and sort of explanation of techniques. And there's been a disconnect, I think, in recent years there's a knowledge gap of sorts, so I think your book does a really nice job bridging that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if Cozy Coastal Knits had a theme song, what would it be?
Well, probably have to have a beachy theme, so we could do, I think, Kokomo, because a lot of the designs I developed when I was in the Florida Keys, and California Girl. Some of the patterns are inspired by places I had been in California.
Very fun. So I like that because, these patterns, they're all named for different coastal areas. So I think about, East Coast.
Exactly. And some of them are rivers. The Delaware River mitts. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a mom, I know that it's completely unfair for anybody to ask me who my favorite child is, because you're not allowed to have a favorite child and you don't. But asking you to pick a favorite project is not the same. So not maybe favorite, but which project was kind of the most natural and which was the problem child? Whether we're talking like not the ease of knitting, but were there issues like with production side, with yarn or, sourcing or writing the pattern or taking the photos? Tell us a little behind the scenes.
Sure. Let's see. I would say that the problem child was doing the men's sweater because, because there's this sort of mental stop point where a lot of people don't want to wear a certain color. And they will forego an entire opportunity because they don't like the color. So I had plenty of time, and so did the rest of the world, and everyone was home, to inquire of male friends and ask their wives, what colors do they wear? What colors do they like? What do they feel good in? And the frustrating thing was everybody came back to, remember those gray Champion sweaters, those sweatshirts from the 1980s? So I thought, all right, just that's where the numbers are taking us. I have a background in math and science, so that's where the numbers were taking us. And I decided, let's make a sweater. And finding the materials that would work well for a sweater for a man was kind of a challenge, because I wanted to find something that kind of gave that sense of just this soft thing you wanted to cuddle up in. And so I came up with the St. Michael's Fog sweater. Oh, yeah, and that's my husband.
I was wondering, what a handsome guy.
Thank you. My husband was very kind to let me help myself to other items in his closet to figure out what he liked and didn't like, and to figure out a way to make a sweater that had an athletic fit for a man was a challenge. So on that sweater, if you look at the back view of the sweater, you can see that there's some ribbing that goes up underneath on the inside of the arms. And there's just a few tailoring tricks that I figured out as I was going through the design process, that if one were to make it for someone with an athletic fit that they wanted to wear, you could do it the way the pattern is written. And then to also be able to say in the pattern notes, and if you don't like this, start it off and then express a little bit of verbiage about how to start it so that the whole sweater is more like a tube rather than tapered. And I think that was probably the problem child, was finding the right yarn so that it kind of looked and felt like a sweatshirt.
Cozy, right?
Yes, it had to be cozy. And then the challenge was finding someone to wear it for the photo shoot. The model wanted to wear it because she thought it was, like this big cozy boyfriend sweater kind of thing with a white shirt. And she had the whole outfit picked out. And then we thought, well, wait a minute, it fits him. So
Because you made it for him, right?
My husband was a more than willing model. The hardest thing, though, the challenge behind the scenes on that was that he had to sit still so they could put a little makeup on him. It was a really sunny day. It was an exquisite, just one of those fall days that are gift days here in New England. And so it was uncomfortable to be out there wearing an alpaca sweater.
Poor guy. Now he knows what those models go through.
Exactly. Now he knows what women have to go through, right?
Exactly.
When they're out there wearing all that makeup. And then, let's see, favorite? I think for me, my favorite, and I'll be very curious to see what other people think about the idea, is the skirt. I wear skirts all year.
You wear it. I thought that was really cute. I have never knitted a skirt, but I've always threatened to do it. I've knitted a dress, but never a skirt. And I'm on it. I would do that.
I really enjoyed knitting that skirt because it's done from the waist down to the hem. So it can be different lengths. And if you wanted it to have a slightly different shape, again, pattern notes are always a good thing.
Absolutely.
So in the pattern notes, I describe how you can make some modifications to it if you so desired.
Oh, I have knit a skirt. I knit the lane splitter.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, if you haven't knitted a skirt, it really is kind of a fun thing to do. I'll have to knit this one. That would be really fun.
Yeah. And there's a really good pattern. I don't remember which mode collection it is. I'm sure you have it at the store, where they had a pair of trousers that were knit in alpaca.
Right. Yes.
That was my reward project to myself. After I finished and the book went to bed and went to print, I made myself a pair of those, and they are absolutely fantastic.
I want to see those. When you come down, you'll have to bring those.
I will bring them.
So cute. So I love how you talk about your inspiration for the book and that scene that you set where you're in a hammock and you've bought this green cashmere and you just really are enjoying relaxing there and knitting your green cashmere, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, some people go on travel and they buy T-shirts or hats or whatever. Knitters buy souvenir yarn, right? So, other than the green cashmere, what are some knitting and travel memories that you have?
Well, the patterns that are all in the book are derived from different things that I've done over time. None of them per se was actually done, except for the green cashmere scarf, which isn't a pattern in the book, which is something I was working on, were inspired by places I'd been, like Nantucket or Delaware River Valley. In terms of pieces that I have done for myself when I've been on the road, I had done a version of the Santa Monica tank top. I bought the yarn in Easton, Maryland. Blue Heron used to have a store in Easton that I used to visit on my way to St. Michael's. And so I could pick up yarn there and I could go and putter around the Chesapeake Bay work on it a little bit. Well, it happened one time that I had to make a trip out to Santa Monica in the middle of knitting the sweater. So it became the Santa Monica tank when it was refined and reworked a little bit.
Nice. Was that rayon metallic? We used to go over, we had a retreat over at Blue Heron Yarns area. That was a lot of fun.
Neat. Oh, that's a nice place to go. I just really like that area. They're now up in, I think it's Lincoln, Delaware.
Oh.
But yes, it was the Blue Heron rayon metallic.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful yarn. Okay, so here's a fun question. If you could teleport to any coastal location in the world and knit there for one day, where would it be? And what would be the project you would choose?
One day.
Just one. Well, give yourself a long weekend.
Because I'm thinking, how much knitting could you get done in one day?
Well, we're teleporting, so there's a suspension of disbelief here, right? So.
True, and there's no travel time either, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no jet lag.
Exactly. Let's see. Well, my maiden name is Palermo, so I think I would go to Sicily.
Nice.
And just spend a couple days relaxing by the beach, reading and listening. And as I sit there reading a book, to have the knitting in my lap. Something easy.
Yes. Nice. Okay, so how did you transition from being a knitter to being a designer? Was there a pivotal moment you decided that you wanted to do this, or was it a gradual process?
Well, I'm not really the size that most people are in the ideal knitting world when you look at those charts from the Craft Yarn Council. So I've always had to apply sewing principles to my knitting. And for me, the design concept of being able to design for others was based upon my experiences of how I had to make changes to patterns for myself. So that's why my pattern notes tend to be very wordy, because I try and provide as much detail as I can, thinking if I was in this other person's position, what would I have liked to have known the first time I made whatever it is? And to be able to sort of problem solve and provide information so people can find their own way and their own solution. So for me, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
For me, it's just a background of born of necessity.
So you started as a knitter and you started adjusting patterns and then moved to designing your own from scratch.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Let's see. Somebody has a comment, another comment about the tank.
Oh.
Hey, Terry. Hey, Janet. Hi, Betty. Hey, Marigold. Hey, Amy. Betty likes that. Okay. So can you kind of walk us through the process of creating this cozy coastal knits? I mean, when you're a designer, it's one thing to say, I'm going to design a sweater for myself. But there's a whole different level when you are designing for, for the masses.
I think,
or a collection.
I think if I were to approach it from the sitting down and trying to figure out what I wanted to do perspective, my idea was to create a collection of items that people could enjoy making when they were in a social setting with their friends. So the idea wasn't to create the most phenomenal lace and textured patterns that would take months and months to do. The idea was to make pieces that were fun and that were not technically challenging so as to preclude you from social engagement. When I was working on it, we were all isolated. So it was sort of my way of saying, you know what? When I can get out of here and I can go see people, this is what we could do together. And to approach it from the perspective of what could we all do together? Well, ponchos are a really good alternative to shawls because everybody was working on those. So I wanted to make sure that there was a collection that represented different elements of the wardrobe that you could make your own using other yarns. Like you could make the Santa Monica top. If you wanted to make that tank top, you could make it in cotton, you could make it in wool, you could use the rayon metallic and make an entire wardrobe worth of garments from the base pieces that are there. Layer them if you need to, and to be able to enjoy the process of making them. I'd like people to sort of think of it as a three-dimensional scrapbook.
Cool. Is there any way that, like, somebody who's an aspiring designer, I mean, what is the mindset? What is it? What is the process of kind of putting together a collection, or even getting started designing a simple pattern for publication or whatever, if somebody wanted to be a professional designer?
I would say that if one is approaching it from the standpoint of addressing a call for design, like when Vogue Knitting comes out with a concept and they will put out a general call that is an expression of what they think the issue should be. What should that issue encompass? What should people think of, the feeling, the sentiment of that issue? That one has to look at the call for design and figure out what would fit in with that. So, for example, if it's a call for design for baby sweaters, you're not going to submit something that is a men's sweater or a skirt. You want to make sure that you align what you're providing them as an alternative to what their vision may be, or not really an alternative, as a three-dimensional product that they can put in the pages. That's one approach. Another is if you just have an idea and you think it would be interesting to create a particular item, then that might be something that one may want to simply sketch up, do some swatches, and then take the approach of the item that you're making. What in the history of other projects you've done has gone well and what hasn't? And how can you take lessons out of previous experiences and present them in such a way so that others have a more positive experience with your pattern? And there are people who can write like that. Read the patterns from Rowan, they're beautifully done. And learn, how the cadence of a pattern comes together.
So that's interesting. So I think is it fair to say that if somebody wanted to be a designer, they can sign up for these design calls, these calls for submissions?
Yes, what one would want to do is most of the publishers of craft books and of magazines, not only paper magazines, but don't forget there's also electronic magazines that are out there. They have on their masthead some information about getting in touch with them. And if you approach the publisher and look at their website, or even call the publisher and just ask about being placed on the call for design distribution list, then they can provide you the information about upcoming issues and upcoming editorial calendars. So the two things you want to ask for are to be on the call for design distribution list, and if they have it, an editorial calendar. And then the next step is when they do actually send out a call, know what their advertisers are, because you don't want to submit a pattern in a yarn that is a direct competitor to one of their advertisers, unless it's a very small yarn company. So you never want to present them with an alternative based on the competition.
That's a really good point. And we have a really great question here from Irina.
Oh, hello.
Is it better for an aspiring designer to self-publish patterns or try magazine calls? Or, yeah. And I think by self-publish, you mean like in Ravelry or on your website? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great question, Irina. Thank you. It depends upon what your objective is. If your objective is to explore the idea of publishing a pattern and you want the editorial assistance of a particular group like Soho Publishing, then responding to a call for design is the best way to get that extra editorial assistance that may be necessary to bring the pattern to life. If you have a concept and you want to vet it with a group, you can self-publish it and put it in Ravelry and ask for people to test it. You can pay test knitters, and other people will do it because they have the time and they're just gracious with their time to help. And then if you are self-publishing a pattern, it's always a good idea to, in addition to having someone test the theory that you have presented, the pattern you've written, is to have it edited professionally by a tech editor. Just because especially where one is starting out, it's good to start off on firm footing. And having an editor helps you to just sort of see the perspective of someone who may just be picking up the pattern. They ask great questions and they provide you that sort of sounding board that can be helpful for, especially when you do your first few designs.
Yeah, I think it's sort of interesting too when you're self-published, or even if you're submitting a design to, a call,
Mhm.
versus the designers that design for big houses. You mentioned Rowan.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you that the designers who design for Rowan and some of these other places, they submit a sketch and a swatch, and that's it. And somebody else writes up the pattern in the whole Rowan, like in their theme and their brand language.
Mhm.
And I'm sure Vogue does a similar kind of thing. Vogue Knitting, Soho does a similar kind of thing. And they have professional tech editors, but like you say, when you're independent, you kind of bear those costs yourself, don't you?
Absolutely. The group at Soho Publishing does a phenomenal job with the editing of patterns. They actually require you to submit your version of the pattern, where you're right, Rowan does not require you to present a sort of a row by row instructions, but they also don't have general calls for design.
Not at all. They have what I call a stable, a stable of designer.
But you can definitely get on the list for Soho. They recently did a call for granny squares. They're doing a book on granny squares. So 60 granny squares with, I believe it's a Cascade sport weight. And they had a call for design about that book of, what was it, I think March or April. So if you are on their distribution list, you can get information about upcoming calls for their books as well as for the magazines that they produce.
Very cool. So here's a question I think kind of pertinent to you is how do you balance your own creative vision as a designer with the needs of the publisher or your audience? And what factors do you consider when you're designing for a specific target market, or do you do that?
I think it's important to consider what problem you're solving for. And it's not a problem like there's a leak in the ceiling. It's a problem, it's a happy problem, right? You want to make a sweater. And what I try to do is to understand what may be missing in a particular collection and where I can pull from my own experiences and projects that have been successful or projects that my students have enjoyed to be able to say, this is a potential solution. And by framing my response to a call for design from the perspective of what would I like to see in the pages is for me, the best way to make a difference and make an impact. If you look at my patterns, you'll see I don't design children's clothes. I don't have children. I don't know what the best thing is for a child to wear. If someone asks me to make something for a child, I gladly will, but I will go and I will get a book. Bergère has some fabulous children's patterns.
A Debbie Bliss book.
Yeah. I have that Debbie Bliss dog sweater book. So yes, there are people out there who have expertise that are much deeper than mine in areas like that I just feel I cannot provide a solution in that space. So I don't respond to those calls for design. I try to present a solution to a space that I'm comfortable working in: men's sweaters, women's sweaters, home.
So you have to be true to yourself.
I have to be true to the questions being posed to me. If I can't answer it in the way that I would want it answered if I asked it, then I'll refrain from providing a solution or a concept.
No, I get it. I get it. So, those of you who are watching, tell me in the chat if you've ever thought about designing your own sweater or designing sweaters professionally. I'm just curious to know. I mean, I know a lot of you certainly have the skills to do it. Is that something you've ever thought about? You know, I would be super interested to know. And are there any questions that you have for Rosann? Is there anything? I know she's been extremely generous with her information here, so I just would love to know if there are any questions, that you would have. Kelly's like, no, not even no, just no. That's so cute. I think designing is hard. Not from the technical standpoint. I mean, I have no issue with technical design, right? I mean, like you, I'm comfortable with math, but it's more what would I do that hasn't already been kind of done? And, I don't know that anybody would want the kinds of things I would want to design, because I would want to design the things I like to wear, which are boring clothes. I like boring clothes.
It's like a hat. There's someone who's going to fit in it, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And it's going to fill a void in someone's wardrobe.
What's that?
It will fill a void in someone's wardrobe.
Yes. Okay. So we have a couple questions. Susie's like, no, I have not. It's so funny. All right. So Marigold says, definitely. What are your tips for grading a pattern? Great question.
I typically will start with looking at the Craft Yarn Council to see what the sizing parameters are for a particular type of garment. And then I'll call on my skills working with sewing patterns to figure out what my proportions should be based upon the swatch. Oh, and I always make a big swatch. I know a lot of people hate swatching, but it really pays off, especially if you're working with something like a superwash or bamboo, like the Ram Metallic we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Because not only do you want to make your swatch, but you also want to wash your swatch as you would care for the garment. And if you're going to hang it in the closet, be truthful with yourself. Hang it in the closet for a couple days. See what happens to the shape. Because the impact of the weight of the fabric and the construction of the yarn is going to make a difference. So in grading a pattern, I always try to figure out what's going to happen to the yarn in a certain context, and then apply the dimensions of that to the Craft Yarn Council standards. And that seems to be a good selection for just in terms of the depth of sizing that they have.
Right. They have now the full, I think it's to 62 bust, from 28 to 62.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that's right.
So Emmy is asking, she's often taken elements from different patterns for herself, often because she doesn't find the perfect pattern. Yes.
And that is something that a lot of people do. And I have done it myself too. When I work with a pattern that it just doesn't quite work for me, I will try to look through the catalog of other things that I've done in the past to find another solution. And this is part of the creative process.
Absolutely. So Irina has another question, and it is, does book format limit your size inclusivity due to the limited space? I know that the book format, magazine format, printed format impacts the language that you use.
Yes, and Irina is correct. It can also impact the number of sizes you present. It can impact even right down to the way that you may write the pattern instructions. I personally, one of my pet peeves is that I think it's important that a book be something that can be translated into an Audible format. And I fought tooth and nail to actually use the word, instead of saying K1, I wanted to write out knit one, because then an Audible translation would make it more accessible for people. But it just wasn't to be. I also thought that if the sizing could be more extensive for the patterns, that it would be more useful to a wider range of potential people to make the patterns. But at some point, the prevailing the editors just preferred to be able to fit the book into a prescribed number of pages. So because it may require a lot more instruction to make a size 52 than a 42, it simply wasn't feasible to put all that information in the book. So instead, what I did was I was able to put in a relatively extensive selection of pattern notes, and I'm always available to help people. There was someone who wanted to make the Ocean Beach poncho, and she's very tall. So she had asked, what kind of modifications do I have to make to do that? And we've walked through it, and we figured out a way that she can present the ponchos that will hang the same way it hangs on the model, but it will be sized appropriately for her frame. And that's part of it too. It's just knowing how you can potentially make modifications to help somebody overcome what may be a shortcoming, particularly of printed patterns.
Yeah, it definitely is tough. We had, I remember having a conversation with Sharon Brandt about this when Rowan adopted the inclusive sizing, and it really, like on the schematic, when you've got now whatever 12 sizes, it's just a completely different typographical, layout, and things are just different. Yeah.
They are. And Rowan has, they have very large margins in their pages when you look at their printed pages. So they really do take the time to lay things out in a very specific way. But I could see that even for Rowan, it would be a challenge when you do start to get into larger sizes, ranges, that all of a sudden you have additional dimensions that are just difficult to fit on the page.
Your book is beautiful, by the way. It's really lovely. I mean, let's see. It's got lots of really pretty pictures kind of within the pattern.
Thank you.
It's really lovely. And I mean, so here's a simple ribbed hat, but it's really sort of special. It's got this cute little swirl at the top. And if you've never designed anything or, modified anything, it might not seem like a really big deal, but getting that to work right is a huge deal.
It took
Huge deal. Right?
Yeah, it took some doing. I just thought it would be fun to have a swirly at the top that didn't look like, a cone.
I love it. It's great. It's great. So I have one question from Betty is, do I sell your book? And I was going to talk to you about that after. See if that's a thing that we can arrange. And I would love to have you come down, when you are in town, you can come, and it would be lovely to have you. So
that would be wonderful. I'd love to visit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I can't make the retreat this year, but that really looks like it's going to be a fun time too.
I think it's going to be super fun. So what advice would you give aspiring knitwear designers who, other than the technical things about subscribing to the data calls or submission calls and such, what are the steps or lessons or, where do they start? What's the first thing, the first sort of set of steps that you would recommend that they do? What should they start doing and thinking about?
Think about ways to fill the voids, to be able to look through whether it's a collection of books on the bookshelf or through a series of magazine offerings. Like if you were to look at the last 5 or 6 Vogue knitting magazines, think about what you feel is missing in the pages and what you can do to, with your own designs, fill those pages and those voids. The first thing that I designed for a publication was for Prime Publishing, and it was a pair of mitts, but they were knit out of cotton. because I run on the beach. And when you run on the beach in January, you don't necessarily want wool gloves. And to be able to have a pair that, using cotton, as you know, it can be difficult because of the way it droops. But to find a stitch that would work with the cotton, and I could just throw them in the laundry, and they would be ready to wear the next time I took them out of the dryer.
Perfect.
So just figure out the voids and fill them.
Marigold asks if there are courses or a program that you would recommend for garment design.
Marigold, I think that depends what you want to design. Are you interested in knitwear design or crochet wear design? Or perhaps even sewing?
I think she means like knitted garments, like sweaters and such. Like,
Sure. If you're designing for yourself, to find a solution for yourself, Ellen, you have that wonderful program that you run in the store where you help people with their measurements and they can custom fit. That's a great approach if one is trying to design something for themselves. If you're trying to design it for a larger market, there are wonderful crochet programs that are offered by Edie Ekman. She's a phenomenal teacher. If you're interested in knitwear, Shirley Payton has a wonderful book.
yes, I have it right here.
Yeah, I was good because I was thinking I have to go get it. But do you have that book?
I actually do. I just was referring to it. So yeah, it's fantastic. And plus I have all the notes that I have from when she was here in the shop several times. This is a really great resource, Marigold. Yes. I mean, it really, oh yes, absolutely. That's a really great tip, Rosann. This is a wonderful book. I mean, it is so detailed.
Yep, that's one of the ones that I used when I was learning how to set up just my approach to, okay, if I want to fill a void, how do I fill it? And what can I potentially design? And the way that Shirley writes is just inspirational. She's just a phenomenal writer. And the way she can just explain things and break them down is great. There are, for simpler designs, Pam Allen, she had that book of shawls. She wrote a book of shawls, and it's a few years back at this point. I'm sorry I don't remember the title, but if you look for Pam Allen's books, in the back of her books, she usually puts information on how to make modifications if you're making a particular item of a particular shape. And then Wendy Bernard's book on knitting, that one is the third reference that I have downstairs on my shelf.
That's top down in the round, or in the round, maybe not top down. Wendy Bernard.
Her book is custom knits,
right?
And they are not all raglan and top down. Some of them are different types of construction as well. She has a beautiful portrait collar sweater. In
the ingenue sweater.
Yes, I think.
I know. I love
that one. And just reading how she has designed her patterns. In the back of that book, there's a whole chapter on the concept of how one can make modifications. So I think that those three are the best for knit. And if you want to take a class on how one would do the same for crochet, Edie Ekman has some phenomenal classes.
Excellent. So what I'm hearing, and if I could try to encapsulate it, is sort of the same thing that I say about knitting sweaters, is that just start. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. If this is something that you're interested in doing, just start modifying sweaters for yourself, or, you know, think in terms of what you would like a sweater for yourself, what's missing from your personal wardrobe, and design something for yourself, and, you know, learn about the process there, and then, you know, put it out there. And you'll probably see a lot of people on Ravelry say, oh, that's so cute, what's the pattern? And then you know that other people are interested in that as well.
Mm-hmm. And people at your local yarn shop. I always think the in-person experience of trying to see what people like or don't like about a project is very important. Guilds are a good resource too if you are fortunate enough to have a knitting guild in your area.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So what's next for Rosann? Are you starting the next book already?
I have a table of contents, and it would be cozy coastal crochet.
Oh,
So I have some preliminary swatches and some ideas for that. And I think that the big thing I want to do in addition to that is to continue to work on filling some of the voids for people with some video and educational opportunities.
so would these be the same garments rendered in crochet, or would they be completely different looking and feeling garments?
I think that the two forms of expression are different enough to warrant there being some overlap, but they're not going to be direct interpretations. I think that from an educational standpoint, it's really good to be able to look at something done in one form of handwork, whether it's knit and then figuring out crochet or vice versa. But I think that the more creative expression would be to have one piece inspire another. So if I find out that everybody really, really loves making men's sweaters now, maybe there'll be more men's sweaters in the crochet book.
But you know the curse, you you can't knit your guy a sweater until you get the ring, right?
Exactly. Well, I think after 30 years, it was a safe bet that he was going to enjoy the sweater, and I didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you and to chat about this beautiful book. I'm so inspired and happy to see that a designer of your caliber is putting out a book for knitters of all levels, and that you're actually making something that is going to serve them through their learning process. I love that so much. It's going to be a resource for, I think, a lot of knitters to have on their shelf, just to, I remember there was all that great information in that one book, and that they will come back to that again and again, not just to knit the patterns, but to get the information that you've shared so generously in there.
Thank you. I hope
Yeah.
so.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I look forward to hearing and seeing Coastal Crochet. Boy, say that 3 times fast. That's about as fun as seashells. Seashells.
Now say it better.
Right? Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I look forward to having you in the shop again come maybe November.
Yeah.
And everybody else, I look forward to seeing you again soon. I hope next week when we are looking at the Noro trunk show garments on real people. So that should be lots of fun. And until then, keep knitting and create something beautiful. I will see you next time.
Bye.